My name is Sean Feccio. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Versailles Health, the parent company to 3 downline verticals: Versailles Ophthalmics, Versailles Discovery, and Versailles Diagnostics. I like to say we are a transformative healthcare company. We are living in a different world right now that's going to continue to change rapidly. We call it the 3P mission. We believe in proactive healthcare. Right now, we live in a reactive healthcare system around the world, which is treating the symptoms and not the root cause. It's always Band-Aid medicine, and we're looking at this through a different lens. How can you be proactive with your healthcare, just like you other aspects of your life? The second P is around preventative care. How can you be preventative in your own health and wellness on a day-to-day lifestyle? How can we prolong chronic disease from taking place? How can we prevent things from happening through regular screening, regular diagnostic testing, so you can own your own healthcare? The third P, which I find the most revolutionary in what we're doing and the most groundbreaking and disruptive in society, is around precision medicine. How can we look at the individual? How can we look at you? How can we look at me and treat and understand the cellular makeup of what's going on inside the body? Picture it as anti-aging from the inside. Not aesthetics, not Botox and fillers, but what's going on inside the body and what can we do about treating that particular body or mind. This is Dr. Patel, 25 years as a cellular microbiologist with a concentration on mitochondrial research. We are doing some amazing things in discovery and research around chronic disease and longevity. So, Hemal, this is your life's work, right? Is understanding cellular function and mitochondria, looking at mitochondria.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we share in the same vision and we have core value alignment. And that core value alignment stems around this whole longevity movement. And how can we really get in and hone in on precision medicine?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that is the future. Tied with AI, and where we're going as a society is going to be around precision medicine, personalized medicine. How do we look at the individual and treat the individual?
Yeah.
Okay. What we're seeing right now is 2 movements. We're seeing the big movement of anti-aging from the outside, which is a kind of crazy movement.
Yeah.
People are doing some wild stuff.
Crazy,
right? We
yeah.
got BBLs, we have Botox, fillers. Everyone's starting to look the same. It's very bizarre. Because if you ask that individual, that's great that you look good outside, but how are you aging on the inside?
Right.
And what's going on down at the cellular level?
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that concept. Why is mitochondria so important as an individual measurement and assessment tool? And from a baseline standpoint, what is it picking up that is not being picked up in blood, urine, genetic testing, et cetera? So
Yeah.
there's two-part question.
Yep. So people have fixated on the nucleus as the end all and be all of aging well, right? It is not the path to longevity. Our genes are designed to move to the next generation and then eliminate us, right? If you stick around long enough, you're going to take resources away from your children. And so genes are selfish. They want to move to the next generation so you get longevity with them, right? Longevity in the terms of generational kinds of things and mutations and adaptations. And so to look for the holy grail of the fountain of youth in the nucleus, it hasn't panned out. People have been trying to find genes that lead to longevity and all these things, and there may be inklings of it, but it never materializes. So what is it about aging that we're thinking about that happens? And so in every living system, no matter if you're a C. elegans, a human, a whale, whatever, what happens in the arc of your life is that you're born, you have this crazy growth spurt where you're growing in size, you're growing neurologically and other things. And then you have this phase where you've grown, right? And you've gone past this phase of reproducing and moving to the next generation. This is where things start to go on the other end. The problem with aging is it's a balance and a misbalance of energy. You have to figure out how to generate enough energy to survive and live and do the things you need to do and be resilient at the cost of all of the pressures that limit that energy. The core functionality in our cells that create energy are mitochondria, right? And so the way to live long is this balance of energy. And so it's not the nucleus, it's figuring out how to make mitochondria more resilient and long-lived.
So is it consistent? So you see about peak performers, right? high-profile athletes, fighters, professional tennis players, NFL players, they're always trying to over-supplement. They're taking all these things. Their trainers and their agents are pushing to get the most out of them from a physicality standpoint.
Yeah.
If you're constantly stressing the mitochondria and the energy in your body, is that a good or a bad thing?
It's not, right? So most people we've looked at on the me screen are over-supplemented. So they're over-tweaking their mitochondria to work when they don't need to work. This is like everything in life, right? Why put energy in something that gets you no cost? So if we're sitting like this, talking to each other, do I really need my mitochondria to be in a place where I can outrun a lion? No. I need them to be tamped down where they're...
Hemal, you will never outrun a lion.
You don't think?
No.
I think I could do it. I'm Indian, right? Indians
So
run
we're going to
pretty
do
fast.
that next. That's the next interview. It's going to be on a safari.
But
See how that
basically,
goes.
you don't need energy when you're sitting around. And so what we see in these individuals, in a resting state, their mitochondria are churning and they're cooking along. When that happens, the system will eventually fail, right? There's a lifespan that some things have to work. And the more you work them, the lifespan goes away. And so when you're resting, you really need your mitochondria to rest. You need other inefficient systems to take over and make energy so that your mitochondria aren't overworked. When you're in that stress state, you need your mitochondria to wake up and respond. And so that's the balance, is how do you do that? Well-trained athletes have this, right? If you're not supplementing, but you're just conditioned, you're conditioned to stress when you're stressing, and you're conditioned to completely relax when you're relaxed. And that's what we need to train our mitochondria to do.
And what's compelling about what we've created, which is by far, in my eyes, one of the most revolutionary onsets of technology, and we're just at the beginning here, right?
Yeah.
We are creating a market based off of the research you've done for 25 plus years.
Yeah.
And we're at this point where we think we can solve a lot of problems or prevent problems from happening in the future for the individual. We talked about peak performers and people that are in the longevity space, that are in the health and wellness space. I mean, the amount of business going into med spas, wellness clinics, longevity clinics, functional medicine doctors, cash-based medicine. People care about their health. They want to live longer. You can have all the money in the world, and I've seen it firsthand, but if you're suffering from something, that is a meaningless thing. You want to be able to live a healthy lifestyle that you feel energized. Talk to me more on the chronic disease side of why this test is important, because it's really for everybody, right? It's not a one size fits all. Everybody should be measuring mitochondrial function and efficiency with our test as a baseline measurement and look at trends over time. Just like we would with blood work and just like we would with any other aspect of our life. We need to do it with mitochondrial function testing. Talk to me about chronic disease and some of the research and what we're finding around neurodegenerative disorders, fertility, cancer.
So every non-communicable chronic disease, the end effect is something wrong with the mitochondria, right? It's this balance that we talked about. You have to make enough energy in a system to balance out the things that system needs to do. Chronic disease is an imbalance in that. Either you're over-consuming energy or you're not producing enough of that energy. The reason for this is, I mean, we're in Texas, right? Elon Musk has not invented a battery that can store biological energy. We can't store ATP. It gets made, it gets used, and that's it, right? So there's
Does it die off in the body? So it gets used and it just diminishes?
It's gone, right? You have to make new energy, right? You have to make new ATP molecules. As an example, like the heart, it's constantly beating. It's consuming a huge amount of ATP and energy throughout the day and throughout your lifetime. 30% of the volume of your heart is mitochondria, right? I mean, that's a huge amount of that mass is mitochondrial mass. Mitochondria make 2 to 4 kilograms of ATP a day in only your heart.
Wow.
So, but you don't gain that 2 and 4 kilograms. It basically gets made and used, right? So this is the problem with chronic diseases, is it's this misbalance of energy generation or use. Either you're using too much or you're making too little. It's when you optimize this that you then get rid of that chronic disease, because now you have the force and the energy you need to do the things that have to happen. So any organ that fails in a chronic disease, it's this misbalance that leads to it.
Okay, so say somebody, 60-year-old, 50-year-old comes in, they run a mitochondrial efficiency test. They are suffering from early onset of neurodegenerative disorder. And they are looking at this as a way or a means to help slow the progression And so say they take a test,
Yeah.
they get a result. What in that result do you interpret against that chronic illness, and then what do they do about it?
So it's not a diagnostic, right? We're not at that phase. Eventually, when we do enough of these tests, we'll build a case that'll go through the FDA, and we'll go through that regulatory process to do this. There are patterns that emerge, right? And so what this test does is it goes beyond what everything else is looking at. So the tests that most providers are doing right now are these organic acid tests, right? So you pee out stuff in your biochemistry, and you can measure this in urine. Specific biomarkers, and I think there's like 4 of them that they look at to give you a sense of what your mitochondria are doing. So something that's not even in your body is supposed to predict what your body's doing from a mitochondrial perspective, right?
Okay.
The other way to get at this is people look at enzymatic function, right? So they'll scrape cheek cells and they'll look at enzymes in your mitochondria and see how they're behaving. They're not looking at how the mitochondria are actually functioning. They're just looking at what the potential of that functionality is in terms of the proteins that are encased there.
Okay.
Genetic testing does the same thing. It looks at the possible potential that exists, but it never looks at the realized potential in a functional assay.
So let's talk more about that.
Yeah.
So because people ask this a lot, right? You know, I'm talking to people every day about this, and I've never had a no. I've never spoken to someone and explained what we're doing and had a no that they're not interested in looking at their mitochondrial score, right? But they always say, well, I've done a genetic test, or I'm doing a genetic test, or I do blood work. So what's the difference between what my genetic test profile is versus what you're going to give me?
So there's a couple ways to look at this, right? A genetic test is unbiased in the sense that you're looking at everything that's in your genetics, but it hasn't been a realized potential. Your DNA gives you information about who you are, but it's
not a real stamp of time.
It's malleable, right? It can change with epigenetic modifications and other things. Okay. So you really don't know how that DNA is going to behave. And to look at all of these changes in your DNA and say, you're going to die at this age or you're going to get this disease, you can't predict it, right? It gives you a sense that there's a potential for it, but there's so many things you can do in your body that will eliminate that, right? So let's say you find in your genetics this case that you're going to get diabetes. Well, if you never eat sugar, if you exercise, if you do the things you're supposed to, that potential never gets realized even though it's in your genetics because you haven't created an environment that supports those genes to create that diabetic endpoint.
Okay.
So that's the problem, I think, with looking at genetic testing is its potential, no functionality. A lot of these tests that exist by biomarkers and other things, they basically give you a biased way of looking at something. It's someone saying that this marker correlates to this and this is how it is for everyone else. It may not. So our test is agnostic to biomarkers. It looks at everything that you're making and producing.
Okay.
It moves that onto a living system and it sees how that system functionally responds to that environment that you create all the time in your body, right?
Okay.
And so now it's biomarker agnostic.
So biomarker agnostic. So
it's not interested in potential. It's
Okay.
actually looking at direct functionality.
Okay. And when it looks at direct functionality, talk to us about mitochondria and how they shift and what the time span is of that shift. Because the first thing that many people have asked me, I went out all night partying and, I didn't sleep and, I don't want to do the test this morning because my mitochondrial function is probably going to be off. Just like blood work, right? That's why you can't eat.
Right.
You got to just only drink water, no caffeine. And if I go out all night on a bender and get my blood work done and ate McDonald's 4 times in that evening, my blood work may be a little bit skewed, right? Whereas a mitochondria test, me-screen test, are you saying that the mitochondria don't move in that nature, that it's not, so definite that you do something based on behavioral change in your life that it's going to impact the mitochondria that day?
Yep. I mean, we've looked at morning, evening, fed, fasted, benders, other things. They don't seem to move that mitochondrial number that dramatically.
Okay.
And so it's a very stable aspect, right? So it's a measurement of your lifestyle. So if you're going to do something, it really is going to take a long time to shift that number.
What would the time be? Give us an
estimate. So typically 2 to 4 months is what sort of mind-body approaches would do. And mostly body kinds of things, right? Exercise, supplements, those kinds of things. There are things that push the envelope very fast. So we're doing a study right now with ayahuasca, we see changes in 24, 48 hours with this. We don't think that they're sustained very long, but you get this huge change to the body and the dynamic where you see this dramatic shift. You can see this with intensive meditation. So if you go into a week-long retreat with Joe Dispenza, you see changes in 7 days.
Amazing.
Again, there's no sense of how long that's sustainable. So typically what we're looking at are individuals that don't have the resources to do ayahuasca journeys or meditations, but they have the resource to be at home and exist and live and exercise, move, eat, and do other things. So this is really the intervening thing. When you do basic lifestyle things, it's 2 to 4 months to see dramatic changes. And then the question is, how long can you keep that sustained, right? Once you go down this path, can you keep that up and do it the rest of your life?
So that's interesting. So as you're talking, I'm thinking through this as it's almost a research validator mechanism. So it's a pre and post assessment. So let's just say you're going on keto, or you're going to get off alcohol,
Yeah.
or you're thinking about getting off 4 of the 5 prescription meds you're on. You're going to change your lifestyle up completely.
Yeah.
You do a mitochondria me-screen test before you begin this change of behavior in life.
Yeah.
You get a baseline measurement here. Then we measure it over a 90-day window, for instance.
Yeah.
And that's where we can start to see, did the stem cell treatments work for me? Did the keto diet change my overall energy levels?
Yeah.
Did my new workout regimen as a professional tennis player impact my cellular energy and cellular function so
Yeah.
I can get peak performance optimization?
Right. So this gives you a way to target things, right? And so this goes back to that question you had is, what do you do with the result? And the big question, I mean, my wife and I were talking about this last night. She's like, so what? Right? I ran her me-screen test and she's like, well, so what? And that's the big question. Well, so what, right? Here's your result. What do you do with it? And what we're moving is the more and more data we collect, the more and more literature we look at, those numbers actually mean something, right? And Juan and other scientists in the lab, Sierra, we always talk about this. You look at a lot of tests and they're random number generators. They basically, you run the test and if you take the sample at the same time, you send both samples in, you're likely to get 2 different numbers from that test. We don't see that with the me-screen, right? It really is interesting that it correlates between the different things that we're measuring, and it gives you this unique window into who you are because it's measuring a core feature of who you are. It's your energetics, right? It's how your energy is moving in the system and how you're metabolizing and doing those things. The and so what, I think, becomes really important. So when we see changes in ROS levels or the dynamics of mitochondria or the energy balance, it gives us some insight based on real literature and things that have been published of where to start guiding people and what to do, right? So I think when we think about suggestions that we make to people, they have to be a tiered kind of thing. And so the first level of this has to be zero toxicity to the human. And so the things that we can do are mind-body approaches, right? Eat certain foods, certain diet types, physical exercise, meditations, mindfulness things, other things that you can do to change your overall stress response, which then has a global effect on your health.
Sure.
Those are things that have very little toxic side effect, and those are things that the matrix will pump out and would suggest, right? Some people want a little bit more than that. So the next level of reporting and what will give people insights into are what are supplements that are out there that give them a sense of changing their mitochondrial numbers.
Sure.
And these supplements will change based on the values we see and the algorithms we've developed that look at those values together, right? One of the things as a scientist and a purist I won't do is I won't put things on this thing that I haven't validated in the literature or that we haven't tested ourselves, right? Why flood this thing of thousands of things that people can do if we don't know if they work, right? So it's going to be only validated things that have real data around them that will suggest that people actually do. The caveat to that is, let's say some company comes in and says, we have this new compound and we think it's the cure to mitochondrial disease. Well, fine, run a test with us, clinical samples that you give us, and we'll run it in a pre-post kind of thing and see if it actually makes a mark and leaves a firm change. If it does, then we'll put it on our matrix. So physical, mind-body kinds of things, supplements. The next level that I think is huge, and we're at biohacker conferences and this all the time, most of the floor space you see are devices. People are doing hyperbaric chambers, this light, that light, infrared sauna, this breathing device, this oxygen water, right? There's so many things out there None of them have really been validated. They make all these claims that they target mitochondrial health, they target longevity, they target stress and all these other things, but there's no marker to do this. And I was talking to a physician and he's like, I think you've just built a bullshit detector. And I'm like, yeah, that's what the Me screen is, right?
Yeah.
It gives you a way to test all of these things. So eventually, once we feel comfortable with devices we've tested, we'll give suggestions of devices that we know create resiliency in mitochondria. And then the final thing will be if people really want to go extreme into the far end, right? These are FDA-approved compounds that have been published in the literature or we validated in our screens that show changes in mitochondrial functionality.
Got it.
An example that comes to mind right now, which everyone is doing in this longevity and space, is low-dose rapamycin. Right? It's an mTOR activator and it does crazy things for longevity because it activates these mitophagy-autophagy pathways. Do you really want to be taking a prescribed drug to live longer?
Right.
I don't know, but maybe
Well,
there's something to it, right?
Yeah, a lot of Americans do right now.
They do. And so our assessments will give you all of this. And so you can start at whatever level you feel comfortable with. And some of these things you may already be doing, right? And we'll just give you a way to reconfigure them a little bit.
Hemal, listen, every time I talk to you, I get chills because I know we're really on the cutting edge of healthcare and we're disruptive. And it makes me feel good that we're actually solving true problems and changing people for the better. And this movement is going to continue to happen, right? This whole biohacking movement, which means biohacking the body, understanding what is truly going on inside of one another, and then treating accordingly based on how each individual is made up, right?
Yeah.
And so you inspire me. And I think you've been integral as a huge movement within the Versailles Health team. And now we're commercially launching and we're helping individuals. We're looking at chronic diseases. We have research collaborations forming and we're going to better the science, looking at cellular research and cellular function, which is the root of everything, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate everything you're doing at UC San Diego, the 25 years of work that you've put into building expertise in this very finite field, and let's go crush it. Let's go change the world for the better.
Yeah. And
thank you.
I think this is the path to do it, right? Understanding who and what you are at the core level, which is your energy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Thank you so much.
Excellent.